I think we're back,
Okay.
and
And
we are
let
back.
yes.
So, unfortunately, yeah, the massive raid from IDan Simpson, I'm not sure what that was. It was a restream problem, unfortunately, because I was online and transmitting, and I was able to continue the Zoom call. But yay! Thank you, everyone who stood around, stayed around. And if you didn't click on the Yes TV icon twice, sorry to have seen you go. I hope that they'll come back. But yeah, we were talking about COP26. Go ahead. I think Alfred, you might have said something.
I was just saying that the ban might be too strong a word, but the official schedule for COP26 includes no mention of nuclear, and they've completely excluded it, which I think is very telling because, if you have any confidence in renewable energy, you would want to invite the competition in so you can show how much better you are. But they never do this. They just declare that renewable is the future and press forward like the bullies they are.
Hmm.
And fossil fuel industry doesn't have that problem at COP.
No, no. In fact, as we were just discussing earlier, the fossil fuel industry has many guardian angels that are shepherding them through the doors of the climate discussion.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Yes, exactly.
this exclusion, this active exclusion from COP26 of any discussion of nuclear, especially in terms of participants holding panels and stuff
Yes.
like
Yeah,
that.
there's no official inclusion of nuclear in
Yeah,
COP26.
it's especially telling because it's literally saying that our data cannot stand up to scrutiny.
Hmm.
If we allow nuclear in, we're going to be made fools of. So they can't afford to allow nuclear to actually have a space at the table and actually present real data.
Well,
It's more about the renewables than it is about removing fossil fuels.
Yeah, because we've done this weird thing where we've allowed fighting for the climate and renewable energy to be bundled as this totally interwoven concept when they're really not. People think talking about the one automatically causes the other, and it's just not the case.
So let me do. Sorry, let me do a little bit of a little bit of a thank you. Thank you to IDan Simpson for rating us with 49 viewers, and thank you to the following: Jake Sass, Pizza Killer 78, Let's Bones or Lest Bones, Cancel Student Debt, Admitted Flunky, and Formal Object. Thank you for the following. You can catch out more information about environmental activism and nuclear energy. Oh, and thank you, Radical Left Agenda, for following. Sorry, I don't have alerts on right now for the Eco-Modernist channel live. I'll think about how that's going to interrupt the flow of everyone's discussion. So let me get those thank yous out of the way, and back to you, Gabe.
Yeah. I was going to say something that right in the name, Intergovernmental Panel. That is the key, intergovernmental. Who is these governments? I mean, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the other oil states as well, who have I mean, that gives it back, not only gives a backdoor to the fossil fuel industry, but all these governments edit the findings of the IPCC on everything. So, I mean, I have to wonder, how and I know that their findings on the climate in general are on the conservative side because they want to, you need to do that to be accurate, but I have to wonder if even the findings themselves have been kind of, whether it's a reason why the findings that they have not really lived up to what really happened since the IPCC formed. In other words, they made predictions that were about things that were supposed to happen by the 2100 that are starting to happen already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, it's not that. I mean, there is tremendous flaws to the IPCC model. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
Gabe,
for one thing, let's consider these people employed Michael Mann at one point. So their hiring practices can't be the best.
Yeah, that's because they're biases too.
Well, the other thing is the Conference of Parties is part of the United Nations. It's an outreach of the United Nations in a way. And another branch of the United Nations is the IAEA, specifically a nuclear watchdog, so to speak, over medical uses of nuclear, agricultural uses, as well as nuclear power. And so it's what is it? The IAEA says 9 out of the 17 sustainability goals are directly supported by nuclear energy, and nuclear is being excluded. It's they're that's what's egregious to me, is that they won't even allow the IAEA to have a side event attached to the COP talks.
Mhm.
So we want to move on to our final story of the day. Unfortunate news. So everyone keeps trying to tell me, just wait. Solar is going to do it. It's going to solve all of our problems. Well, let's get some reality in here. We actually have a polysilicon shortage. You know, where everyone's having trouble getting GPUs. Now that's high quality polysilicon, but solar, PV solar, is lower quality polysilicon. But we still have a shortage. It's still, you know, these two segments are competing with one another, and it's still a significant problem.
Might
So
that
one,
be because of COVID though? I mean,
it may
we have
be.
shortages with everything.
It's definitely a factor.
Yeah.
The pandemic has caused so many problems in the supply and logistical chains worldwide. It can't be understated.
However, it's more a basic supply chain issue. This is not. This is, I think, the first time it's made the normie news, but this is not the first time that solar cell production has affected the computer markets. It's happened several times in the past because there's only so much silicon in the world, and it can be made. It can only be made so quickly in the various grades that are needed by the manufacturers. And one of the things we've discovered many times is that the energy industry can always win the commodity bidding process because it's the industry that powers all the other industries. So yeah, if a huge amount of solar PV gets manufactured, then your graphics card does not get manufactured. It's just that simple.
This puzzles me though. Isn't silicon just sand? I mean,
Thank you for giving me a lead into my next point.
Go.
So this is a perfect example of how the renewable people, they look at potential and not the reality. And this is most prevalent in solar because they always talk about the insulation of the earth. There's, you know, a million times humanity's energy requirements raining down on us every day. And that's a great fun fact, except you have to actually gather it up.
yes.
And this is really difficult. Now, how does this relate to silicon? Yes, silicon is one of the most common things. I don't think it's in the top 10. I can't remember the top of my head, but it's really common and it's all over the place. It's on beaches, it's in the ocean, it's in dirt. It's like a third of beaches is silicon, which is great until you realize the chemistry is actually way, way, way more complicated than that. The silicon that is of the quality level and composition that can be used by manufacturers is actually very, very rare, and it does not come from beaches. In fact, I don't think it can come from beaches, even if you're willing to pay more.
Yeah, you have to accommodate for so much of the different chemical compositions in your
And
process. It makes it
impurities,
impossible to
yes.
industrialize.
Yeah.
Yes.
I kind of
So
thought you'd say that.
so yes, the ability to get silicon and the good industrial silicon that we need for modern society is very limited, and we're wasting it on a power source that requires removing trees and only generates 20% of the time in good weather.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, if it's done in a desert, I mean, a real desert or Badlands or something like that, I mean, that
Yeah,
ecological
okay.
problem is not as bad.
Two problems with that. One, there's no reason to do it at all. And two, I'm skeptical that there's any such place. Like, we tend to ignore deserts, but that's a very shallow opinion on ecology. Ivanpah is famous for, Ivanpah solar is in the middle of the desert and it's famous for killing a whole bunch of endangered turtles. But they've
Not to mention birds flying overhead.
yeah, the classic example is of course the Sahara Desert, which we all know is just piles of sand. But they've run the numbers. If you cover the Sahara with enough solar panels to actually make a difference electrically, it will have an effect on the rainforest because the trade winds carry the dirt of the Sahara Desert to the rainforest, and it's really important to the plants and animals there. It's not something we would see in our lifetimes, but it would have a deleterious effect over geological timescales. Nothing has no effect except for homeopathy. For something to have an effect, for something to work, it has to also have a side effect. Like that's really basic. This is one of the things that makes nuclear so great. We can confirm it has the smallest side effects, and we can keep track of all of them.
Right.
And we already are.
I had a small question in chat about a person named Andrew Forrest who wants to do hydrogen in Australia. And just to bring us back to LCOE here, we have this number of $127 per megawatt hour. That is for a combined cycle. That's a constantly running, very, very efficient natural gas source. And if it's really hard to see it, so I might have to find a, where is it? There it is.
And that's US dollars?
Yeah, this is US dollars for LCOE. And there it is. So right down here on the bottom, it's footnote 8. This is the high case by using a 20% blend of green hydrogen. So that's not even clean hydrogen, clean gas. That is not 100% renewable. That's 20% green renewable hydrogen sources. Mix of wind and solar generation.
Yes,
and stored in a nearby salt cavern. So this is a brand new sort of experimental, so very similar to that Andrew Forrest plan for replacing 20% of our gas usage with hydrogen. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, hydrogen, isn't it something, I forget the figure, but is it something close to 50% energy loss?
Depends on what you're using it for.
I mean, for energy, to create, store to store energy and to reuse it.
It's quite a lot.
Every form of chemical fuel is going to have a characteristic energy loss. That's true for hydrogen. It's true for uranium, but uranium has a lot less because there's so much more energy dense.
So
hydrogen has applications. Hydrogen definitely has applications.
Exactly. I'm very middle of the road on hydrogen. I don't think it's going to fix everything, and I don't completely hate it. But there's stuff that hydrogen's really good at, and in those situations, the energy loss doesn't matter. Just make the damn hydrogen and pay for it.
Yeah, like low carbon steel, low carbon concrete, like all the process heat needs that extra kick at the very end. Good point.
So
it's the best chemical. It's the best chemical rocket propellant.
So you can use it as a long range EVs. You can use it to make synthetic fuel. You can do all kinds of things with it. The problem is, how do you get the problem? Whether you love hydrogen or hate hydrogen, the problem is always how do you get the hydrogen?
Yes.
And how do you store it?
And how do you store it? Ideally, you don't store it. You want to make it close to the point of use. But how do you get it? How do you move it? What's the hydrogen infrastructure? If you're doing steam methane reforming, then complete waste of time. It's actually worse than fossil fuels, and you need to use it for as little as possible. If you're getting it from a carbon-free source, like nuclear, and that carbon-free source has a net end-to-end price lower than fossil fuels, then you can use hydrogen almost for everything you want. And the reality is probably going to be somewhere in between those two.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I've had a nuclear engineer tell me that the advanced nuclear reactors, probably because they're so hot, could produce hydrogen with like 100% efficiency.
Well, the second you hear an engineer saying 100%, you know they're
Well,
lying.
close to it,
Yeah.
close to it. You know,
It would be
There's
much
always
better.
gonna be loss.
It would be much better efficient, much more efficient than low temperature electrolysis. And so yeah, our friend Nick Duran has talked about this in a talk where he went over the uses of nuclear energy for process heat. And so high temperature electrolysis is enormously efficient compared to low temperature. Perhaps Gabe, your engineer friend was saying 100% more efficient than low temperature, and I would believe that number because it
yeah,
would
I
be
forget the statement, but
it would
he
be
was
twice as
saying
efficient.
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
a doubling of efficiency. Yeah.
yeah,
That's-
yeah. He was saying it's like almost completely.
That sounds right. 100% increase on efficiency because most existing power plants operate 30 to 40, and high
He might have
temperature
said that.
plants can get up to 60, 65, which is when you start hitting the limits of the Carnot efficiency.
Right.
Yeah, it's been such a long time, and I don't forget I can't remember the exact quote, but it's could be 100%. I don't know.
The thing about hydrogen is you have to consider there's two losses. There's the power plant losses, and those aren't really something to worry about because you're going to have those anyway, and you can get any power plant, especially nuclear power plants, over 90% overall fuel efficiency, simply by using the power plant for more than one thing, like district heating or whatever. So that's not a big deal whether it's high temperature or low temperature. But then there's the actual inefficiency of manufacturing the hydrogen. And there's actually a thermodynamic limit to that too. And it's quite low. I think it might be around 50 or 60% where you just can't get hydrogen any cheaper than that. So the idea is with a high temperature nuke that you would get close to that by using thermal separation as opposed to electrical separation.
Yeah, I would imagine too that the ability to do many things with a nuclear plant would enable them to load follow much better because
Oh,
if they need to just stop hydrogen from producing, to steady the grid, they could do it.
I can hear.
how about just
I can
no?
hear it. I can hear it coming. Yeah. Well, no wait. There's two things. We're always going to need load following because consumer demand and manufacturing demand is not controllable. When you try to
Yes,
control,
I was just going to say that.
yeah,
I was just gonna say
when you
that.
try to control consumer or manufacturing demand, you are throwing money away. You are making people go without without heating or cooling their home. You're doing something. It's called energy austerity. It drives out the utility of energy, which is to be able to turn on the lights when you need them turned on. And so,
Well,
yeah,
I just got to say really quick, the load following thing is you got to look into it, Gabe. You sound bad right now. The load
Well,
following
I
thing.
could give you a couple examples why I'm right, but you
No.
Go ahead.
I know
Come on.
exactly. I know exactly who you're quoting, and they're wrong. The load following thing is the biggest urban legend in nuclear power, and we shoot ourselves in the foot by repeating it. There are no issues with a nuclear power plant load following. It's a myth. It's something the renewable energy people invented to make nuclear power plants sound less capable. Nuclear power is perfectly capable of doing whatever the energy grid needs today.
right.
And future power plants can do it even better.
Matter of fact, Al, this dovetails with the entire regulatory thing because in the U.S., it's a regulatory issue.
Yeah.
France, France doesn't. They just load fall. They just do it.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me give you a retort though. Do you remember the Super Bowl? I don't know how many years back when they overpowered the system, the grid so much with their spectacular show
I
that
do
they got a
remember that,
blackout.
Yes.
I mean, if you have the ability to just stop producing hydrogen, let's say, to up your load to grid follow that, there's
No,
things that
Gabe, stop. You're describing a fictional fucking problem.
Well, maybe
The nuclear power plant can just go up in output and down in output to whatever is needed. It's not a big deal.
between 75% and 105, 110, something like that.
What you're talking about is where the power plant shifts between two different jobs. So it's running at full and it's making some hydrogen and it goes, oh, the grid needs more. I'm going to stop making hydrogen and shift my energy over here. It doesn't need to do any of that. This Rube Goldberg thinking belongs to the renewable energy people. The nuclear power plant can just go up and down to meet demand.
Exactly. I mean, granted, there are some, when it comes to solid fuel reactors, there are certain mitigating things that might complicate things a little bit. But as a general rule, even solid fuel reactors can load follow just fine. It's not an issue unless you're going really, really deep down and then trying to ramp really, really quick back up all the way to max. In most cases, it's not an issue.
To give you some real world numbers, Gabe, French reactors, which are the most famous for load following, they can change their output by 5% per minute, up or down. That is faster than most natural gas peaker plants. And natural gas peaker plants are the gold standard for load following. That's what wind and solar want to build in order to do the instantaneous backup for when they stop working randomly. And those old French reactors from the 70s are already lapping them.
Sounds to me like the gas peaker plants are actually the silver standard.
Well, no, but because we don't talk about
the gold standard.
Gold standards in popularity. Remember, we don't talk about nuclear. And to be fair, hydro is faster again.
Yeah.
But hydro has a can-and-may issue that would be difficult to explain. But there are no issues with load following. It's a myth.
So I'll just support that. Is that I saw this conversation play out between a Puget Sound Energy hydrologist and a nuclear engineer, and they're like, "So can you do 20 megawatts a minute? Because we've got like limits, regulatory limits. I think is what you're alluding to, Alfred. Is the regulatory limits on how fast you can change your water flows, your water outputs. And so hydro's not always able to fully utilize its capacity because of that.
Hydro has the potential to change its output almost instantaneously, almost any time it wants. The problem is that it's not just the power. Hydro is a very complicated system. It's not just the power plant, it's the water authority. And they need the river within certain boundaries, and they need to control erosion and the fish population and the upstream recreation inside the reservoir, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just because the grid says it wants more or less power doesn't mean the guy with the lever at the dam is allowed to flip the switch.
It's actually a fairly similar thing with reactors in the U.S. specifically. It's a regulatory issue.
Well, with the U.S. Reactors, U.S. reactors are the most regulated. U.S. reactors are told to be baseload, and they almost never throttle. There's a few reactors in the U.S. that do what's called seasonal throttling. They essentially make less baseload at different times of the year. But almost all U.S. reactors, I don't want to say all because I can't find a source for that, but I'm sure it is all. But almost all U.S. reactors were built to be load following, but they were simply never asked to do so because baseload is more profitable and they're very good at baseload. Yeah. And this has gone on for so many decades that experts in the nuclear industry have forgotten that they can load follow. Yeah. And they repeat this myth that they're baseload only, and it's very silly.
And in the current instability gaming environment that we find ourselves in with the deregulated industry.
Yeah.
The utilities actually want to run the plants at 100% all the time, right? Because their actual O&M expenses don't change regardless of what.
Yeah, it's
not like a gas plant where it's like, okay, your fuel is the majority of your cost. So with nuclear, it's always constant.
Indeed, it underpins the arbitrage that they do in other areas of the market.
And let me rake in. That O&M. What is that O&M? It's 75% or so labor. That's jobs we're talking about. It's operation and management is jobs.
Yeah, and half of those jobs are safety if we're talking about a nuclear power plant. Now, a couple more examples for how easy, or 3 examples about how easy nuclear power can load follow.
Operation and maintenance.
Oh, thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
first of all, the classic one, submarines. The submarine reactor turns on and off when the captain says so. Okay, the captain isn't asking about xenon buildup or any of that bullshit. Okay, captain says submarine move. The maneuvering calls engineering and says, I want full speed. Maneuvering goes, yes, sir, pulls the lever. Reactor rods go out. Reactor gets hot. Propeller goes burr. Um, and they do that anytime they want. It's not a big deal. Now, of course, military reactors take a few extra design steps. That's not a perfect analogy. Um, but another one, Dresden Unit 1, I think it was the third power plant nuclear reactor built in America. First reactor built entirely with private money, no government subsidy. Yay for that. It has a unique design. It's a boiling water reactor with a steam generator, which anyone who knows basic nuclear physics, their eyebrows should go up because boiling water reactors don't have steam generators. The steam generator in Dresden Unit 1 was added as a little special feature. I can't remember the exact physics, it doesn't matter. But the point being, Dresden Unit 1 had the ability to jump its power output 20% up or down almost instantaneously. And they did that for load following back in 1960, 60, because they saw ahead to this problem. Nuclear was always intended to be the only power source. And to be the power source on the grid, you have to load follow. And they built Dresden Unit 1 and ran it, tested it, and it totally worked. They realized we don't need that much load following. Like, we're fine. Okay, this is that what we talk about today is just a made up issue. Like, they solved this in the 60s and realized that they were over solving it.
Oh, I
And
stand
third,
corrected.
and third example is which I think is really funny, is I was seeing this it's on I think it's on one of the Decouple podcasts, interview with a nuclear engineer who was talking about this power plant that he'd worked at for 30 years. And he told the story about how he was doing maintenance at this power plant and he found this big piece of equipment. He goes, the hell is this thing? And he goes, what's this thing? They go, I don't know. And he asked another guy, what's this thing? And he went back into the archives and dug through the records because, these plants are decades old and they've been through all their renovations, and found out that it was the blah, blah, blah. And it was this prototype load following thing that had been installed and tested and worked perfectly. And they had never used it.
Wow.
Not even once. And
Amazing.
they found out the reason they never used it is the regulator said, oh, one part of that system is controlled from off-site, so we consider that a safety issue, turn it off. So the power plant was built with this highly accurate second-to-second load following system that would perfectly interface with the grid, and was very safe, but the regulator decided it wasn't safe for their own arbitrary reasons. But it was simply never used and abandoned in place, so much so that they forgot it was there.
Dresden Unit 1. We'll have to look it up.
That was somewhere else.
That they had?
Oh, okay.
Well, because it wasn't
right.
For the second part, for I saw three different things. So the safety issue with this was that part of it was controlled offsite. It was a load following system that would allow the grid operator to dictate how much energy they got, which is the perfect idea. That's what fossil fuel power plants do. And the regulator said, no, nuclear power plants need to be completely islanded. If they want a different power level, they need to call you on the phone.
Right.
And
Why?
that's what exactly.
Regulations.
It's not everything with nuclear is absurd levels of regulation.
Yeah. It's literally regulation for regulation's sake.
So and that's just one example. There are multiple ways for conventional nuclear power plants to safely and efficiently load follow. Okay, that's just one example. Like this is not a big deal. I wanna just end on load following by making it really clear. Coal power plants are usually singled out as being the worst for load following. This is wrong. The worst for load following is combined cycle nuclear power plant, combined cycle natural gas.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, those are actually the very worst, and they're able to load follow good enough, although barely. But your basic run-of-the-mill coal power plant, they say they can't load follow, but that's an economic decision. They just make more money when they're in base load, much like with nuclear. However, I want you to just consider this for a moment, conceptually. Go all the way back before nuclear to the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s. That was the best power grid the world ever had. And it was entirely coal, and it was entirely load followed, and it did it load followed by calling people on the phone and telling them to shovel faster. Okay? Load following is not a major challenge. The only reason it's a challenge is because wind and solar, the only reason it has become a challenge in the modern day and age is because wind and solar power plants, intermittent energy sources, drop out randomly. So there's a huge chunk of energy that has to be made up on short notice. We are
And
making
they surge randomly too.
and they surge randomly, yes. And then you have to take off we are
And
making
they surge randomly too.
and they surge randomly, yes. And then you have to take off a huge amount of energy. That we are creating a new problem with wind and solar. The solution, and this is why I'm a renewable energy basher, isn't to make storage. It's not to make a smart grid. It's not to make fast acting natural gas. The solution is to remove them from the power grid because they're fucking useless.
The best
Okay.
part is no part.
Nuclear, yes. Okay.
It's like
Musk.
Stalin said. Stalin said, "Death solves all problems. No man, no problem."
Forget the forget this Rube Goldberg schemes and forget the myth that nuclear can't load follow. Nuclear power is perfectly capable of doing the job the energy grid needs. France proves it every day.
No weather, no problem. Just
Yeah.
nuclear. That
But
is like, I'll say Alfred makes some very strong statements that I shy away from, and I'll just admit it. I like to make compromise, and that's something he hates me for, but that's okay.
No, I don't.
Love
I don't hate you for it. I don't hate you for it at all. That's where I started.
Okay.
Because it's like, oh, take the middle path. Oh, everyone has their pros and cons. We need to find a balance. We need a mix of all of the above. Anything that's low carbon.
So let's wrap up, and I want to challenge you all. We have to decarbonize, and so I want to get like a policy pledge. How much nuclear should we build by 2050? What percent of global energy should be nuclear? Today we're at 4%. I like 25%. That's a good middle ground policy compromise. What do you say, Alfred?
I would like a 25-fold increase if we're at 4.
To be honest, in order to reach any
That's
of these
100.
numbers, we literally
Yes.
have to be building them the way we built Liberty ships in World War II.
Right.
Which is also
right.
not difficult.
It's not that difficult, but it's not technically difficult. It is politically difficult.
Yeah.
It's very
That's the
politically
problem.
difficult.
That's the
But
problem.
to be honest, France went from nothing to 70% nuclear, building 58 reactors in 15 years by itself.
No,
Right.
and when
So-
you look into the details, they weren't even really trying that hard.
No,
we
they
can
weren't.
we can
They
go way
weren't.
faster.
The
William,
United States,
What's your
the
number?
United States, what's that?
What's your number? Percent of global energy
My
from
number?
nuclear. Yeah.
Oh boy. The thing
Yeah.
is, I'm looking at it in terms of the patchwork of all the different countries and their various industrial bases. The US, for instance, if we got off our asses and really decided, something, the way SpaceX is building starships in Texas is the way we need to be building reactors and just build the things, we could easily do what France did by 2040.
Yep.
But we have to get up off our asses and do it. So my goal would be, yes, 70% for the US.
There we go. Gabe, what's your number?
I think it's impossible to set a number. I think
Okay.
it's too complex. The
It's
politics-
aspirational, Gabe.
So
It's
let's say 25%. The 25%'s the minimum commitment I want everyone to make. 25%. Talk to your local constituencies about 25% nuclear, because that's an enormous increase over what we got today. Kurt, do you have a number higher than mine? Let's go.
Globally, 40.
40%. That's a pretty even keel number, I must say. I think a lot of nuclear advocates agree with 40%.
Yeah.
Who else do we still have on the call?
Only
Chris?
ignorant
Chris.
people.
Oh, we got Chris. What's your number?
I've been saying for months that looking at industrial heat uses as well as transportation and everything we have going, district heating, we need to be between 65 and 80% nuclear. But that's by 2100.
Yep. So
Okay,
something.
Is your number
The question
your
question
number
was
region-specific,
2050.
Chris, or is it global?
Global,
That's
yeah.
global.
Yeah.
Global.
So he's
Yeah.
setting a really good high number. So maybe 40% by 2050, and 80% by 2100.
Yeah. Same.
Or
Yeah, I
maybe
think
because
we're
what
pretty
the
much all in agreement
IPCC
that we
does, they start low and assume we'll accelerate. So maybe 25 or 30 or 35% by 2050, as long as we're accelerating.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, there'll be
yeah,
very little
so-
in 10 years.
So I've got a point I want to run past you guys really
Yeah.
quick before we end. I find one of the hardest parts about the energy discussion, and in particular nuclear, and in particular nuclear versus renewable, is that there's a complete lack of elevator pitches. And in the real world, people have short attention spans, and you need to get in there with something. And after many moons of thought, I think I've come up with one. And it's in the form of a question. I want to just run it, and I seriously want to ask this question if anybody has an answer. Y'all know I hate wind and solar power. So here's my elevator pitch. When, except for renewable energy, where we give them special status, when is intermittent not a synonym for broken? Can anyone give me an answer in the world of engineering? To me, they're broken energy sources. Why are we putting the world's energy, the industry that powers all industries, on top of something that's broken? I repair a lot of things in my real job, and when the client tells me that something's intermittent, I freak out. So I want to know,
Controlled versus there's a controlled versus uncontrolled intermittent.
does anyone
Your car is intermittent.
no, does
No, no,
anyone
no.
You
does
control
anyone
when it's intermittent.
No,
does
it's
anyone
on
want-
demand.
Let me
No,
take
but
it, John.
does
Let me take
anyone
it.
does anyone want an intermittent energy connection, internet connection? Does anyone want intermittent heartbeats? When do we want intermittent? I really want an answer to this.
Well,
When
it's
is
our
intermittent
choice to be.
not a synonym for
It's our
broken?
choice. It's our
Yeah.
choice to have the TV on or TV off. It's our choice to go outside for a walk in the rain, or we stay inside when it's sunny.
No, but you're flipping
That's our
this. It's
choice.
not
Not
using it or not has nothing to do with whether or not it works or not.
But
I'm talking
you're-
about
you're
intermittent
specifying
function.
uncontrolled.
Well, it's available to you.
Can I
All right.
take a crack at that?
Then-
Can I take
okay.
a crack at that?
Okay, one
Yeah,
shot,
please.
and then we've got to go. I see a
Okay.
nice, good raid target, and we're going to go. Go
All
ahead.
right. And we're, both me and William are in South Florida, right? And when the sun goes in, the AC necessity for AC power goes down automatically. So it seems to be a good fit to a certain degree in that respect.
It is a partial fit, and let's end on. I know that we could argue about this one all day.
I
That'd be
rest
great.
my case. If you need 100% carbon-free energy, then partial fits are an admission of failure.
Yep.
And that's
So-
that's the best that renewable energy can offer, is a partial fit, and that's with a lot of caveats.
So
If
I'm
you-
gonna change scenes. I'm gonna let you listen to our commercial, and then we're gonna go raid someone. So if you're in chat on twitch.tv/YourEnvironmentSeattle, please stick around. I found a nice person. And they're about to have a really good conversation. So please stick around, or if you're on another network, come on over to twitch.tv/YourEnvironmentSeattle, and we're gonna go raid James from the internet. But first, I want to tell you about our organization. We are the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. esna.earth is our web address. You can find us there. You can find us on YouTube at the Eco-Modernist channel. You can find us on Facebook at the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. And here is a great message that Gabe has created for the rest of us.
I want to speak to you about a new organization called the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental ecological crisis. It is only through a new environmentalism 2.0 that progress can be made. We believe that our only hope for human advancement and even human survival is through the exponential advance of science in the service of humanity. Eco-modernism is a new environmental paradigm which looks to reverse the fear of nuclear power and scientific progress in general. Ecology-based modernism is the most direct way to define it. Eco-modernism as a philosophy is described in the Eco-Modernist manifesto. We believe humanity should not be rejecting technological progress, but rather separate our impacts from nature through the responsible use of technology and urbanization. Urbanization is an unstoppable worldwide trend and the best solution to many environmental problems. It offers sustainable development for the human population and is a historic antidote to both deforestation and species extinction as humans move away from using wildlife as their protein source. Vertical, urban, high-rise architecture minimizes the use of land, resources, and energy, enabling walkable cities that facilitates the more efficient use of mass public transit as well. It must be emphasized that our support for technological solutions is definitely not about defending industrial polluters, nor does our defense of technology imply that we just need to sit back and let things take care of themselves. To the contrary, we believe that humanity is at a crossroads that severely threatens our future on this planet. I hope by now you understand the worthiness of our cause. Eco-modernism is really only a philosophy at this time. I want to talk to you about the necessity of turning it into a movement, which will be part of the larger environmentalist movement. For it is only through our presence and participation that there can be any hope of moving environmentalism in the right direction. Our aim is not to divide the environmental movement, but rather to multiply its numbers with the incorporation of many scientific and educational communities that is working to both build chapters of eco-modernist societies and support our growth worldwide. I want to speak to you about a new organization called the Eco-Modernist Society of North America.